As a bastion of badassery, it can be difficult to think of Batman as someone who ends up in humiliating situations. Situations where he loses, sure, but for some reason embarrassment seems so far out of Bruce Wayne's ballpark that it's almost physically uncomfortable to try and imagine it. But you don't need to imagine it, as there are plenty of comics that have the Dark Knight get into some pretty cringe-inducing scrapes, covering just about every mortifying experience a human can go through, and several more that only a superhero could experience. In a way, it's kind of endearing, as there are few better ways to console yourself when something embarrassing happens to you than to remind yourself that even imaginary hyper-competent superheroes have peed their pants every once in a while. It's always weird to see, and even weirder to try and take as legitimate comic canon, but these moments remind us that Batman is well and truly human, and as such, capable of experiencing humiliation just like the rest of us. I'm Will for What Culture, and here are 10 times Batman was humiliated. 10. Having his secret identity discovered by a child. Over the years, a fair few people have learned the true identity of the man behind the bat-shaped cowl. For the most part, these happen in ways that aren't all that embarrassing, such as Bruce's romantic partners realizing because they recognized the lower half of his face. However, the case of Tim Drake working out Batman's secret identity is the exact opposite of this, despite the fact that Bruce has dedicated his entire life to concealing any way to detect who he really is. A literal child of age 9 is able to work it out over the course of a couple of hours of deep thinking, and wastes no time in rubbing it in both his and Robin's faces. As it turns out, Tim manages to work out who Batman is because he'd seen Dick Grayson perform as an acrobat, and recognized one of the moves he did as Robin, meaning that his adopted father, Bruce Wayne, was evidently the Dark Knight. Sure, Tim is an incredibly smart boy, who also happened to conveniently be at the one event that would allow him to know Dick Grayson's acrobatic skills, but this only means Batman's identity was discovered by a smart child, which only adds insult to injury. 9. Being made fun of for his car. All-Star Batman and Robin is terrible. It is so bad. The art's great, but Frank Miller's writing is unforgivably awful. It's worth checking out just so you can see for yourself just how badly Batman is characterized in a pathetic attempt to make him seem edgy that just comes off as outright hilarious. The whole run is a humiliation for Batman, to be honest, but let's focus on a more direct moment of humiliation: the Batmobile. Because All-Star Batman explicitly states that countless people have made fun of the fact that Batman named his car the Batmobile, which, to be fair, is a pretty dumb name for a car. When this happens in the comic, the Dark Knight drops about 12 goddams in order to try and make being ridiculed for his stupid naming trends less embarrassing. This fails, and only makes the whole thing seem even more humiliating. Yeah, All-Star Batman and Robin sucks. 8. Basically all of Knightfall. The Knightfall series, comprising of Knightfall, Knight's Quest, and finally Knight's End, is basically wall-to-wall filled with Batman's biggest mistakes. While the most obvious of these is getting his spine cleanly broken by Bane, it is by no means the only moment of shame in these storylines. Indeed, Bruce's decision to give Jean-Paul Valley the mantle of Batman while he is injured can in many ways be seen as worse. Not only does Batman barely know Jean, but what little he does clearly shows that he's way too violent to properly take on the role of the Dark Knight. This in mind, it makes little sense that Valley gets this role when it could have instead gone to Tim Drake, meaning everything Jean does while in the guise of Batman is entirely Bruce's own fault, meaning the shame he feels about the man's actions are, unfortunately, well deserved. 7. Himself. Many Batman fans are likely to remember and adore the iconic scene in Batman Year One where the Dark Knight interrupts a dinner happening between some of Gotham's mobster elite in order to threaten them that their days are numbered. However, what they are perhaps less likely to adore is that the retcon of how this event went down that takes place in the widening Jaya series. Within it, this moment of flawless intimidation becomes a moment of burning shame, as Batman tells a fellow hero that upon threatening the mob, the heat from one of the plastic explosions causes him to have an involuntary bladder spasm. While it does what it needs to, in that it serves as a prime moment of weakness for Bruce to reveal to the other hero to show he trusts him, it also comes at the price of basically ruining one of the most badass scenes in Batman history, which doesn't feel totally worth it. 6. Planning his team's demise. The Tower of Babel storyline has long been lauded as both a comic that shows Batman outsmarting everyone else, and also Batman being made to look like an absolute fool. In short, the comic covers Ra's al Ghul discovering Batman's secret plans to take out each member of the Justice League should he ever need to, and then using said plans to beat them. Ra's also steals the coffins of Batman's parents, distracting the hero for long enough that all his teammates can be wiped out. Not only is Batman humiliated by having all of his best made plans used against him, but he's also shamed by the rest of his team, who are understandably upset that the Dark Knight has made written plans to kill them that are so detailed that a supervillain could use them as a handy step-by-step guide. The final blow came when Batman was fired from the JLA. 5. Getting thrashed by Wonder Woman. Given that Wonder Woman is a ripped demigod with approximately a third of the morals of Superman, it's fair to say that simply being beaten in a fight by Diana Prince is not the most humiliating defeat as far as opponents go. As such, the reason that Batman's defeat at the hands of Wonder Woman in the Hecatia is humiliating isn't just about him being beat, although he is absolutely decimated. No, it's more about the way Batman reacts to it. Because Batman, the goddamn Batman, patron badass for countless hopeful dorky souls, kisses Wonder Woman's ankles while on his knees from being beaten, while trying to call on an ancient practice that would put him in her protection. In short, Batman tries that which can only be described as coward behavior, and it leaves both Wonder Woman and the reader more than a little embarrassed for the Dark Knight afterwards. 4. Getting himself addicted to Venom. Were Batman to have just suffered from a drug addiction in the course of Batman Venom, there'd be precisely nothing humiliating about it, as similar storylines revolving around Iron Man overcoming his addiction to alcohol serve to make Tony Stark appear far stronger than before. However, the plot of Venom has Batman get addicted to the substance Bane uses for super strength purposefully, and despite being fully aware that trying to be Batman while doped up to the eyeballs is the worst idea imaginable. As such, the side effects that overtake him, such as being way more violent and manically laughing while trying to look brooding, are things that he was totally aware would happen, which is why it seems so silly that the world's greatest detective is so surprised when they show up. That said, when he decides to quit Venom, he manages to grow a full badass beard in a month, which sort of redeems him through sheer force of follicle fortitude alone. 3. Creating Brother Eye and being found out. It's worth addressing that from the very start, despite what it becomes, Batman's initial reasons for building the artificial intelligence surveillance system known as Brother Eye were actually very fair. After discovering that the Justice League had wiped his memory, the Dark Knight is understandably a little miffed, and used his anger to create the AI, intending to prevent a similar scenario happening again. While this is, in theory, all well and good, it's worth mentioning that Batman doesn't tell anyone that he's built a robot that watches and judges their every waking move. Even after Ra's al Ghul uses this database for evil shenanigans, Batman refuses to accept that Brother Eye is too dangerous to keep running, meaning that yet another villain gets their hands on its capabilities before the rest of DC's heroes are even told the machine exists. Not only does this earn Batman the ire of basically every superhero going, but it also creates a huge problem when the machine goes rogue that requires Batman to recruit many of his furious teammates to sort out, likely causing the Dark Knight to lose even more sleep than he does already. 2. Being saved by the Joker. Getting saved by the man you're supposed to be beating up is always going to be a bit of an embarrassing moment. With a rivalry like the one between Batman and the Joker, this is doubly the case, which is why it's so monumentally humiliating that the Joker has saved Batman so many times. Perhaps the most notable is the Clown Prince's heroic deed in the Europa series, which sees him save the Caped Crusader right before he falls to his death off the roof of a church, meaning Batman owes his life to the man who continually tries to ruin it. That said, there's an equally embarrassing moment in the War of Jokes and Riddles storyline, when an enraged Batman goes to stab the Riddler, only to have the knife blocked by the Joker, who lets the knife stab through his hand in order to stop the Dark Knight breaking his one rule. 1. Being defeated by a chair. Although Batman has been defeated by a delightfully strange assortment of people over the years, there's few that sound quite as good as Batman was once almost killed by a chair. Admittedly, the said chair was the Mobius chair, a semi-sentient and incredibly powerful device, which makes the whole thing slightly more understandable. After using the chair for his own devices, Batman finds out that the chair is unwilling to let him go. but that it is willing to hurt him, and it makes him bleed from the nose and mouth after he goes against its will, with the scene also implying that the chair is willing to kill him if it comes to it. By all means, the whole thing should feel disturbing, but instead it lands somewhere in the space between being funny and making you question why the world's greatest detective wasn't able to work out that sitting and staying sat in a sentient, all-powerful chair would likely end up biting him in the ass. And there you have it, folks. 10 times Batman was humiliated. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and drop me a follow on Twitter at YouSlyDogU. I'm Will for What Culture, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.